and that's totally fine. Now, we'll discuss this in more detail when we get into ranges, but notice liquidity stacked up, liquidity stacked down. We wipe the highs, we wipe the lows, wipe the highs, wipe the lows, wipe the highs, wipe the lows, wipe the highs one last time, and then the real move begins. This will be explained in a later section in this course, but this is a very common scenario for a range. And generally a range gets wiped multiple times before they leave it. And ultimately here we become bullish again. This is where you have to be really careful. Areas like this can wipe you. And ultimately you use your 4-hour market structure to help you with this. And just remember, if you're not sure what to do and you can't figure it out, you don't need to trade. Everyone tries to force trades. I promise you, if you don't try to force a trade, you will miss out on trades, yes, but you'll always miss out on more losing trades than winning trades. Because if you're not sure, you're more or less gambling, and that's not what we want to do. So we create a new structure here. Now we are realigning with the 4-hour time frame. At this point, you can start building a narrative now that the 4-hour pullback is complete and that this low failed to take this high, so this becomes the long-term target. Obviously, you pay yourself out every 15, but this is the long-term target. As soon as this low is taken, we can anticipate a pullback. And this will all be taught in expectation order flow, what we can expect the market to do and why. Again, you have a low, you have a high. Ultimately, you don't have any structure here until this low goes. And this is one of those areas where you really don't have any 15 structure till the end of the impulse. Depending how big this is here, let's see, it's borderline. It's definitely borderline. Maybe we'll class that as structure. And ultimately you had a pullback here and continuation to the downside here. So you actually become bullish once this high goes. And I don't love structure points like this, but they have to be considered as something. So that's our pullback, new structure. Yeah, that's right. So our next high would be up here. And could say this pullback here becomes our structure. You know, this is one of those areas where structure can get quite messy. In areas like this, I choose not to map any extra market structure if it's just moving sideways like this, as you don't really need it. Again, we have an impulse up, we have a pullback, and you have another impulse up. And sometimes price action does do this where it's not pretty, and you do see stuff like this. Ultimately, you don't really need to be any part of that. Like, there's really not enough pips in there for me to even want to get involved. You can, but it's also one of those days where you can be like, I choose not to trade. For the most part, for probably 4 days a week, there's good trading. 1 day a week, you're going to find that you're forcing trades. I recommend everybody start off with one pair. If you're finding you're doing really good with one pair, maybe watch two. And once you have two pairs, you can generally find a trade every day of the week on one of the two pairs. And if you can't find a trade on either pair that day, that's totally fine too. Again, you don't need to trade every day. You just want to take high probability setups. So this is one of those really not awesome areas that you sometimes get. And this is obviously news driven. This is not typical EU behavior. But once again, you can see it's one of those ranges. Liquidity's wiped up, down, up, and you stack more liquidity here, stack liquidity here, you wipe it all, you wipe all of this, and then the real move begins. This is a very common scenario. You'll notice it happen over and over and over again. It is a couple sections up ahead here where we talk about ranges and why they happen and what they are. So here what we have is bearish structure realigning with the higher time frame. And once again, let's just measure this. It's actually structure there, so we can classify that as structure. Perfect, we got another impulse down. We can measure this one. This is one of those things you may or may not want to class as structure. Completely up to you. I'll class it as structure, I think, just because 14 pips is pretty decent structure. And ultimately we have our last push here when this low goes. And what this allows you to do too is get on the right side of the market more often and quicker. So here again, not the prettiest price action, but it gives you short-term buys. Again, you know this is counter 4-hour trend, so you're not expecting to shoot for the moon here. You just have to be smart and understand that the pullback's not going to last long. And ultimately, this would be your structure points here. Minute structure. We have another structure point here. And your low gets violated here. Now you start formulating the idea that the bearish or the bullish push is likely over and that you're going to start looking for sells. Once again, you can see a bunch of stacked liquidity up here. We grab it. Demand gets disrespected here. Demand gets disrespected. Demand gets disrespected. Ultimately, supplies start holding, and we can start formulating the idea that that's coming. We obviously don't typically expect candles that size unless they're news driven. So we don't really have much for structure here till all the way down here, I don't think. Bit of a pullback here, more market structure. Have another pullback here. So this is once again structure. I don't love it, but we do have to classify that as structure. The next bit of structure is all the way down here. Once again, you have a pullback. And this is your 4-hour low. Let's just zoom out and see how much we've mapped. I think we've mapped more than enough that we can have something to talk about and talk about how this all correlates together. So what I'm going to do is join all this market structure together with a green line, and I will meet everybody in the next video and we can talk a little more about how these time frames correlate together. I'll see you guys then.